West Ham. It's kind of like stupid to complain about. I swear I'm not complaining.
If I was a Hollywood executive, I would blacklist her.
If you listen closely outside London's Palladium this week, you can practically hear the tension humming through the brickwork. Insiders are alleging that director Jamie Lloyd's high-profile Evita revival has gone from buzzy rehearsal room to five-alarm fire, because Rachel Zegler, Hollywood's on-again, off-again darling, is reportedly rewriting the rulebook on diva behavior. Quick disclaimer before the lawyers stretch: every jaw-dropping detail you're about to hear is reported, unverified, and very much alleged. So grab the salt shaker, but don't look away.
I was actually, oddly enough, auditioning for a Broadway show of a very famous Broadway musical that was having a revival, and the producers and directors were ordering lunch while I was singing.
How do you go from Hollywood's next big thing to the face of Disney's biggest disaster in years? When Rachel Zegler landed the role of Snow White in Disney's ambitious live-action remake, it looked like a dream come true. A career-defining moment, the kind of once-in-a-lifetime casting that usually turns young actresses into household names. But somewhere between the press interviews, the fan backlash, and a rumored confrontation with Jack Black, something went terribly wrong. Instead of launching her into stardom, the project unraveled in real time, and what followed wasn't just a PR mess. It was a complete implosion, one that left fans confused, Disney panicking, and Zegler caught in the middle of a storm she might not recover from. This wasn't just a bad movie rollout, it was a cultural moment, and depending on who you ask, it might have exposed a crack running right through the heart of modern Hollywood. When Disney announced Rachel Zegler as the new Snow White, it should have been a slam dunk. She had just starred in Spielberg's West Side Story, she had critical buzz, and she was young, charismatic, and seemingly ready to carry one of the most iconic roles in cinematic history. After all, this wasn't just any character. The original Snow White wasn't just Disney's first full-length animated film, it was the foundation of the entire Disney empire. Reimagining that story for a new generation came with high expectations, and Zegler was placed at the center of it. But almost immediately, things started going sideways. Instead of embracing the fairy tale magic that made Snow White a beloved classic, Zegler took a different approach in interviews. A lot different. She repeatedly referred to the original prince as a stalker. She mocked the 1937 film's story as outdated and problematic. And she proudly declared that her Snow White wouldn't need a man to save her, because this time, the prince was being removed entirely. To longtime Disney fans, it didn't sound like a bold reimagining. It sounded like someone tearing down the very thing they were hired to represent. And then came the quote that would follow her everywhere. When asked about the controversy, Zegler shrugged it off, saying, "People will always come, see me no matter what. Everything I do, people will wait in line to see." That line was like gasoline on a fire. Fans weren't just annoyed, they felt insulted. The arrogance, the tone, the complete dismissal of the audience's concerns. It all started to build, and slowly but surely, the dream role that was supposed to catapult Rachel Zegler to superstardom began turning into something else entirely, a spotlight she couldn't control, and a backlash that was just beginning to form. In the weeks leading up to the film's release, Rachel Zegler's public presence didn't slow down. Despite the controversy swirling around her, she continued posting online, confident, composed, and seemingly unfazed. And then she posted something that changed everything. A photo, then another, and another. Zegler began uploading images of herself sitting alone in completely empty theaters. No fans, no buzz, just rows and rows of vacant seats. At first, people were confused. Was it some kind of artistic statement? A commentary on fame? But the more she posted, the more uncomfortable it got. To the internet, it didn't look clever. It looked tragic. Here was an actress once positioned as Disney's next big star, now sitting in silence, surrounded by empty chairs, a chilling visual metaphor for how far the hype had fallen. And whether she realized it or not, she had just handed the internet a perfect symbol of failure. Memes exploded overnight. Screenshots circulated on Twitter, TikTok, Reddit. People captioned the photos with brutal sarcasm, pointing out the irony of someone who once said the audience would always show up, now literally alone at her own film. But what made it worse was that she didn't stop. She kept sharing them, as if unaware of what the images were actually communicating. The public didn't see a confident star anymore. They saw someone in denial, someone who couldn't admit the obvious. The audience wasn't showing up. And in today's digital culture, that kind of disconnection doesn't stay quiet. It gets amplified, dissected, and turned into entertainment. What was once Zegler's fairy tale premiere was now being viewed as a public unraveling, and the whispers online were growing louder by the hour. While Disney was quietly bracing for impact, something totally unexpected was happening across town, and it couldn't have come at a worse time. The Minecraft movie, yes, that Minecraft, was exploding at the box office. Critics had written it off before it even launched. Industry insiders didn't take it seriously. After all, how could a movie based on a blocky video game compete with one of Disney's most legendary fairy tales? But it didn't just compete, it dominated. Fans packed theaters, reviews were glowing, social media buzzed with praise. And then came the real punch. Minecraft reportedly made more money in the US in a single weekend than Snow White made globally in 3 weeks. Let that sink in. While Rachel Zegler sat in empty theaters trying to salvage her image, Jack Black, one of Minecraft's biggest stars, was leading a surprise cinematic hit. Kids were dancing in the aisles, parents were laughing, audiences were having fun. And fun, not lectures, not statements, not rebranded classics, was exactly what audiences were craving. It was a humiliating contrast. One movie was being celebrated for its joy and simplicity. The other was being roasted for arrogance and overreach. And whether fair or not, Minecraft became the mirror that made Snow White's flaws impossible to ignore. But the most shocking part? That's when the rumors about Jack Black and Rachel Zegler started to swirl, and everything took a darker turn. As the internet mocked, critics pounced, and box office numbers cratered, a new twist emerged, one that no one saw coming. According to behind-the-scenes whispers, Jack Black, the voice of Kung Fu Panda and a central figure in Minecraft's runaway success, confronted Rachel Zegler during this chaotic stretch. The details vary depending on who you ask, but the core of the story remains the same. Someone finally told her what no one else would. Sources claim Black questioned how she was handling the backlash. Specifically, her pattern of brushing off criticism by calling fans trolls and acting as though any pushback was just rooted in sexism or hate. According to one version of the story, he looked her in the eye and asked, "Do you think calling fans trolls is helping?" It was a simple question, but one that allegedly cracked something open. What happened next depends on which rumor you believe. Some say Zegler got emotional. Others claim she stormed off set. A few reports go further, suggesting she had a full-on breakdown in front of Disney execs and later sought therapy. None of this has been confirmed, of course. But what is clear is that the press tour went eerily silent right after that. Zegler's social media, once hyperactive and filled with defiant energy, suddenly went dark. Disney began releasing vague, robotic statements, and the momentum that had already been slipping completely vanished. It was as if someone pulled the plug. Internally, sources say this moment, the alleged Jack Black confrontation, was seen as a breaking point. The moment when denial gave way to reality. The moment when the backlash stopped being a social media problem and started being a full-blown corporate crisis. But the worst was still ahead, because while the actors scrambled to regain control of the narrative, the film itself was starting to fall apart from the inside out. While Rachel Zegler's image was unraveling in public, behind closed doors, the Snow White production was quietly collapsing. What was once marketed as a billion-dollar cornerstone for Disney's future had become a behind-the-scenes disaster. Multiple insiders started leaking the same message. The film was being torn apart in post-production. Entire scenes were being cut just weeks before the premiere. Storylines were disappearing. Editors were scrambling to reassemble the movie into something watchable. One source described it as a frantic patch job, while another compared it to trying to build a bridge during an earthquake. And it didn't stop there. Test audiences, the people Disney uses to gauge reaction before release, were reportedly confused and unimpressed. Words like tonally inconsistent, emotionally flat, and preachy kept popping up. One attendee said it felt like watching two completely different movies glued together, and not in a clever way. Even Bob Iger, Disney's CEO and the man steering the entire ship, was reportedly alarmed. After receiving brutal early feedback, he allegedly began asking hard questions. How did we get this so wrong? Why didn't anyone raise the alarm earlier? What happened to our golden formula? This wasn't just a bad test screening. This was a foundational crisis, because Disney wasn't just betting on Snow White to succeed, they were planning an entire wave of live-action remakes around it. And now, with the pressure rising, the PR team in full damage control mode, and Zegler's name trending for all the wrong reasons, the cracks in that strategy were starting to show. Worse, everyday Minecraft was making the contrast even more painful. One film was collapsing under the weight of its own message. The other, thriving on simplicity, fun, and charm. and fans were beginning to ask the question Disney never wanted to hear. Has the magic completely disappeared? By now, it was no longer just about Rachel Zegler, or even just about Snow White. This was about something bigger, a growing frustration that had been simmering in audiences for years. The feeling that Hollywood, and especially Disney, had started caring more about messaging than magic, and Snow White became the symbol of that disconnect. What was once marketed as empowering now felt like a lecture. What was supposed to be a fresh update on a beloved classic started to feel like a checklist, one designed more to impress corporate boardrooms than delight moviegoers. Even longtime Disney defenders were beginning to speak out. They weren't just disappointed, they were angry, not because of change, but because of how condescending it all felt. And then came the comparisons. While Snow White gave audiences long speeches and moral lessons, Minecraft gave them laughter, music, and joy. While Rachel Zegler spoke about dismantling outdated fairy tales, Jack Black simply had fun with his role and invited everyone to join him. The message was loud and clear. Audiences weren't rejecting progress. They were rejecting preachiness. They were tired of being told what to think and how to feel. They wanted to escape, not get scolded. And in the eyes of many, Snow White became proof that Disney had forgotten how to deliver that joy. The kind that feels effortless, the kind that makes kids giggle and adults smile, the kind that built their empire in the first place. It didn't help that Zegler's image had become inseparable from the film's tone. Her earlier comments were replayed on loop, clipped into viral TikToks, and mocked by content creators. She wasn't just an actress anymore. She was the poster child for what fans believed had gone wrong. And as the backlash reached a boiling point, the silence from Disney said it all. They weren't in control of the story anymore. The fans were. As the memes spread, the numbers tanked, and rumors about Jack Black went viral, she stuck to her playbook. Filtered selfies, inspirational quotes, retweets from supportive fans. Everything carefully curated to look unbothered. But people noticed the change. What once came across as bold confidence now felt like forced optimism. The tone of her posts had shifted. Her smile looked tighter, her captions more generic. And in a media landscape obsessed with authenticity, that kind of disconnect doesn't just get ignored, it gets dissected. Comment sections turned savage. Threads called her out for arrogance. Reaction videos mocked her quotes. Even some of her defenders began to admit the energy was off. The girl who had once been hailed as the next Disney icon was now being treated like a walking cautionary tale. Behind the scenes, things weren't any better. At Disney, the panic was setting in. Publicly, they downplayed the situation, but internally, it was red alert mode. Marketing budgets were slashed and reallocated. Reshoots were rushed. Crisis meetings were held almost daily. Executives, once confident in their golden remake formula, were now scrambling to salvage what had become a runaway disaster. And through it all, the story of Jack Black's rumored confrontation with Zegler kept spreading. Not because it was confirmed, but because it felt symbolic. One Hollywood veteran, trying to inject reason into a studio spinning out of control. One rising star, so shielded by PR that she'd forgotten who she was performing for. It didn't matter if the exchange had happened exactly that way, the image stuck. Because it wasn't just about Snow White anymore. It was about a system cracking under pressure. A vision of entertainment that was losing touch with its audience. A studio that had once defined childhood magic, now reduced to damage control and viral backlash. And for Zegler, it was no longer just a rough press cycle. It was a personal unraveling, happening in real time, on the world's most unforgiving stage. This wasn't just another box office flop. By the time Snow White limped into its third week with fading press and empty theaters, it had become something much more dangerous for Disney, a symbol of mistrust. A signal that the studio's once unshakable bond with audiences was starting to fracture. Because this time, the fans weren't just disappointed, they were done giving Disney the benefit of the doubt. Suddenly, every new trailer was being picked apart frame by frame. Every casting announcement was met with skepticism. Every attempt at modernizing a classic was seen not as bold, but as desperate. The studio that had once defined timeless storytelling was now being accused of treating its audience like a focus group, and it showed. And in the middle of it all was Snow White, the project that should have reinforced Disney's magic, but instead exposed how far they drifted from it. Fans didn't want reboots packed with forced commentary. They didn't want their childhood favorites reduced to buzzwords and brand management. They wanted what Disney used to give them so effortlessly: joy, wonder, heart. It's no exaggeration to say that this film may have marked a turning point. Because unlike other recent flops, Snow White came with legacy. nostalgia, emotional weight. And when even that couldn't save it, the message was clear. The formula isn't just stale, it's broken. And if even someone like Jack Black, beloved, bankable, and at the center of a smash hit like Minecraft, couldn't lift Disney out of the mess, then maybe the problem wasn't the actors. Maybe it wasn't the internet. Maybe it was the studio itself. So, was Jack Black the wake-up call Disney desperately needed? Or was this just another Hollywood rumor, sensationalized, exaggerated, and destined to fade like all the others? Either way, what happened with Snow White and with Rachel Zegler hit deeper than most celebrity controversies, because it didn't just expose one actress's missteps or one movie's failure. It reflected something bigger, something that's been building for years. Audiences are changing. They're speaking with their wallets, their clicks, their silence. They don't want moral lectures dressed in fairy tale costumes. They don't want studios talking at them. They want to feel something real again, to lose themselves in stories that inspire, entertain, and remind them why they fell in love with movies in the first place. And until Disney and the rest of Hollywood hears that message, this won't be the last meltdown. It'll just be the beginning. What do you think? Was Rachel Zegler unfairly targeted, or did her own words accelerate the downfall? Did Jack Black really confront her, or did the internet invent a hero for a story that got out of control? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We're watching them all. And if you want more deep dives into Hollywood's most dramatic moments, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter. Because trust me, this story, it's far from over.